I mean, a very good evening, first of all, to all of you. In the last session, we had talked about the history of sanitation and how the process of sanitation has evolved. We saw how Professor Kitawaki took us. And then, of course, Professor Chari walked us through the different very basics of sanitation, fecal sludge management, and how this fecal sludge management has gradually evolved into citywide inclusive sanitation, the different parts of it. Today, we would be talking more about the CWIS experiences, how cities have adopted and how cities have taken up and how they have worked out through the challenges. We have a lot of speakers, a lot to listen today, so not wasting much of time, I would hand it over to Professor Chari to set the context and bring in our speakers for the day. Thank you, sir. Over to you.
So, Dr. Banerjee, would you like to display the sequence of speakers? Just a quick.
Yeah, sure, sir. I'll pull it. Is my screen visible?
Slowly. Yeah. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, friends. And some of you are in different time zones. I think Alice must be in somewhere very early or very late. I don't even know where she is, but I see her. Great to meet again, all of you. This second session of the program, online program on citywide inclusive sanitation. So today, the conversation would be taking theory to practice. So we heard about broadly the key aspects of citywide inclusive sanitation. But today we will get reinforced with strengthening our foundation on CWIS by Alice. Miss Alice is from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, one of the thought leaders in promoting citywide inclusive sanitation, and followed by series of speakers. The bios are already shared with all of you, so I'm not going to introduce them in great detail. Then we would have Mr. Singh from the Water and Water Supply and Sanitation Program of ADB, who's going to take a lot of case studies. Then we have case studies of Kampala, we have case studies from Bangladesh, from India. So the whole idea of today's session is to reinforce our learning and translate that learning into a city context. How different cities have really are making attempts or have already made attempts to operationalize the citywide inclusive sanitation framework for service delivery improvement and public health improvement. So without taking much time, I now invite Ms. Alice to give us a bit of context, help us to reinforce the concept of citywide inclusive sanitation, and also sort of guide us in terms of how different cities are actually taking a leap forward in implementing the citywide inclusive sanitation framework. No city is perfect, but different cities are at different scale of implementation. I think that learning will be super useful for our participants. We have a large pool of participants from different geographies, India, Bangladesh, Nepal, African context, and a couple of people from outside the zone. So it's a great mix of practitioners from all over the world, if I may say so. Over to you, Alice.
Great, thank you. Jyoti, I don't know if you got the slides in time or if you would like me to share from this end.
Yeah, can you share your deck?
Yes. No, mute him. See that fully?
Yes, if we could make it full screen. Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. Perfect.
Great. Good. So I can see some pop-ups on my end. I hope you don't see those on your end. But thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you all. Mostly thanks to everyone for being here and having an interest in this topic. It's so important, and we're all learning together. So both having an interest and having an active interest in jointly learning and contributing to really what's a global emerging conversation on how to shift from kind of spotty retail fragmented approaches to urban sanitation to really a comprehensive approach to looking at sanitation as a public service like other public services. It's a live conversation, and we really appreciate ASCI's leadership in hosting these courses and everyone's leadership in attending them. So I'll start with that. I think you've all been through this CWIS framework, and really, you know, we've called this the CWIS framework. If you want to see these three outcomes in the context of market failure, you have to have these three governance functions in place. An authority has to have a policy mandate for the responsibility of delivering services in this way. They have to be accountable to another entity for KPIs, clear KPIs that reflect that mandate. There has to be a resource management and planning approach to moving the mandate, funding the mandate, basically, and providing for revenue generation options. This is, you know, we call this the CWIS framework, but really it's kind of utility functions or the basic organization of utilities and the way all public sector services are organized to some degree, implemented in different ways, but this is the way they're organized to reflect the market failures that are inherent in public services and why we have public services. So I'm going to go really talk about the underlying framework and the underlying theory and how we want to move this idea of a public service approach into the mainstream, and what we're learning along the way, what we've needed to learn along the way in terms of funders, and what we're really supporting a lot of different organizations to be learning along the way with us. I think, you know, I want to say this at the beginning. I say we a lot, and I'm trying to train myself out of that. We're funding several cities. The cities are doing the learning. The partners are doing the learning. They're helping us. They're basically telling us what to learn and what to improve. And so we set out this framework and said, how can we make this a public sector approach in our grant portfolios? What would that look like in terms of a different trajectory for achieving urban sanitation goals globally or within a country? And then we're really then provided funding to a lot of different organizations, public sector and private sector, to say, okay, now let's find out what this is going to look like. So as Professor Chari mentioned, this is a learning journey. And once we set out those very high level goals, it's really about all of us learning together. Just one important principle for us in terms of developing our citywide portfolio and really learning through not just the portfolio, but a suite of other investments to regulators, to ministries, and to other government folks. You know, we really wanted to put the public sector first. The development sector partners are involved, and they've been driving a lot of the narrative around or global sanitation investments, but we really wanted to say, you know, if this is a public sector approach and a public service, what does the government have to say about it, and how do we all learn together and not learn outside of the public sector and then try to have a public sector adoption process. And so I think at the outset, it's important to note that the public sector is really driving a lot of this conversation. So I want to look at two cities specifically in Africa. I know that a lot of the folks on the call are from Asia, and so we're looking at these two cities for this case, just to kind of talk about the challenges of really moving from a projectized retail private sector kind of informal approach to sanitation services to a formalized public service approach. So maybe I'll go back to that framework. Oh, sorry. Apologies. And just remind you, what I want to focus on right now is how are these functions moving and what does it mean in terms of the outcomes? And I'm just going to take a few bits of each component here and talk about what that looks like in two different cities. So in Lusaka, in Zambia, it's kind of a tidy situation in terms of the institutional arrangements. There is now a city utility, or now it's actually a regional utility as of last year, that has a very clear mandate to deliver sanitation services agnostic of the technology being used. So it's utility and or it's sewered and non-sewered sanitation. They have a regulator who translated that policy mandate into a license, set KPIs, are supporting replication in other utilities across the country. As Lusaka learns, they've approved the utility's ability to cross-subsidize across technologies and across communities, and they've approved a levy. And those approvals are based on the utility's continued performance against their KPIs and targets and their ability to report, which meant establishing a new data system and establishing a new financial accounting system, which is still in progress. But the KPIs really from the regulator have really been driving this change process within the utility so that they can start to deliver this service at scale. We have Kampala, and I think we're going to hear later more details about Kampala, the Kampala case study. But the institutional arrangement in Kampala for Kampala City Authority is really a lot more complicated because it's a split mandate. And so when we think about the three mandate types, you could have a mandate that sits with the utility, you can have a mandate that sits with the municipality, or a mandate that's split across technology types. And in Kampala, they're in this situation where it's a lot more complicated because the city authority has mandate for non-sewered sanitation, and the utility has mandate for sewered sanitation and treatment. And so the line between non-sewered sanitation and treatment has actually been very tricky, not just for the two entities to coordinate around, but actually for them to negotiate around as well, because there are a lot of costs in that gray space where you might hand off non-sewered sanitation collection with non-sewered sanitation treatment, and the investments that come before that handoff have a lot of cost implications for the post handoff processes. And so that's been a significant point of negotiation. And the way I just framed that, you would think that maybe, if Kampala City isn't doing their job on collection, it's going to drive up costs for National Water in their treatment. And I think that's partially true. The other side of that is that because National Water has a ring-fenced financing department, they have clear mandates, they have a clear accounting system, they borrow on a regular basis, they are more bankable than Kampala City Authority without that kind of internal accountability system and accounting ring fencing. And so they're able to raise a lot of money, and the work that they do, sewerage, is more interesting to a lot of public funders, and they have the ability to levy fees and tariffs on their water bill that allows them to raise money for both water and sanitation. Kampala doesn't have that situation. And so the vast majority, when you look at the market, the overall Kampala City market, the vast majority of money that goes to sanitation across the two entities is for sewerage, and that correspondingly covers an almost insignificant portion of the city. And so Kampala's ability to serve the vast majority of the city that's on non-sewered sanitation financially and invest in a way that really makes the costs for on the treatment side efficient. They just don't have that financial capabilities yet. Those financial capabilities, and when you look at then when we think about scaling from what do these city cases mean at the local level in these cities? What are the corresponding conversations that we need to be having at the national level? In Zambia, we have this whole national framework that is not just driving change within Lusaka, but facilitating replication in other utilities. In the context of Uganda, the work that's the incredible work that's being done in Kampala under this project and with funding from other projects, the city is making amazing progress, but their ability to institutionalize that progress is limited because of the way their mandates are set up, because of the way their financing is set up, and because they're missing an accountability system. And so when we think about accountability systems, sometimes we think about somebody checking in on you. In a lot of cases, yes, their regulators are checking in and kind of keeping you to your mandate, but that also is a system of providing resources and political will and political space to actually execute. And so without that regulating authority or an accountability system, it's a lot harder for Kampala City Authority to allocate resources and drive change at the local level. And the path for replication, again, not in spite of an enormous amount of work that's just kind of bubbling up because this is so important. This issue is so important. There's not a systematic way to move the country's urban sanitation system forward. And so when we look at this, I think get into the details of what has this meant over the past few years in terms of improved coverage. There's a lot of progress being made. One of the things that we're learning is that the more progress you make, the more you learn, and the harder you realize your task is. And so in this case, just in terms of one of the indicators of outcomes, Kampala is moving backwards because they found out that a lot of what they had thought was safely managed is not. And so this is actually a good sign, frankly, that overall there's an improved ability to understand what the context is. And that if you don't know what your context is, if you don't know where you're starting from, then you can't really make meaningful improvements. In Lusaka, this looks like really nominal progress, but as the little stars at the bottom indicate, not only did their service area expand, but they have a tremendous collection system underway that I'll talk about in a second. And that collection system, the treatment associated with that collection system, the progress hasn't been made on that as of 2021. In 2022, I think more treatment capacity is on place. And so the sludge that was being collected was not being treated. And so these numbers will change significantly. And their ability to drive to get that treatment capacity designed in order to treat sludge had everything to do with the mandate. It was not scheduled to treat sludge at all. And so it's really important that the mandate shifted. Again, thinking about what does progress look like? One of the indicators of the functions, when we look at responsibility, if we go back to saying, okay, what does it mean to have a CWIS system or an FSM system, an urban sanitation system? If you're responsible for that work, do you have staff in place? That's like a fundamental question. And it's a really good initial litmus test to say, how's the country doing? How many cities actually have staff in place to move this forward, whether they want to outsource to the private sector or they're going to execute it themselves? Those are choices that every city or country can make. But if there are no staff positions in place to manage either the private sector or public sector execution, you're not going to move forward. And in this case, Lusaka particularly has made a lot of progress. Kampala has made progress, but we're still working out how to make sure that the staff in place are formalized and institutionalized into the city's service system and are not just project funded. So the KCCA staff are working on the CWIS work, but the budget for them is still projectized. Likewise with accountability, I already talked about this. There aren't accountability targets yet for Kampala, and the ones that they do have are kind of within their system and not external to their system. And so it really makes sanitation have to compete with other budget pressures and policy pressures, and it makes it harder for internal accountability. Really quickly, just in terms of I think some of the stuff we already went over in terms of formalizing staffing and KPIs. In terms of implications for that moving the private sector forward, Lusaka's KPIs are internalized into their department by department management structure. And so the FSM unit staff have a subset of KPIs and targets that are associated with the utility's performance, and their the regulator's annual approval of their business plans, of their performance, and the tariffs and revenues they're able to collect. That subset of KPIs really drives important conversations internally in terms of how well that unit can do their job and what resources they need in order to do their job. One of the really interesting things from my perspective that I've been watching recently is that the regulator allowed them to have a cross subsidy and use some sanitation levy money for ongoing subsidies to reduce the cost of emptying. They're shifting that now and saying no more ongoing subsidies for services. We want you to invest in efficiencies, and because subsidies eternally aren't sustainable, how do you invest in system efficiencies that bring the cost of services down to a point that allows prices for households to be affordable? That's tricky in the context of, currency devaluation and increased prices of goods that the entire world is facing. But it's really forcing the utility to do this rigorous analysis with data, the data that they now have because they've been incentivized already to have a data system, to really look at their data system and say, okay, where do we find efficiencies? How do we invest in learning about efficiencies? Where do we put our money? In their case, it's going to be a lot of money into on-site upgrades, which is something that they didn't consider to be their mandate in the past. Without on-site household upgrades, the rest of the service delivery chain is too expensive for them to sustain and still be affordable to households. And so they're investing in very different things and continuing to learn about where those efficiencies take them with respect to their investments. In Kampala, they're just getting to some of these questions, but again, because this sits outside of a formalized national framework and KPIs, we're a little bit further behind. They're a little bit further behind in terms of figuring out how to embed that in a broader conversation about finance for the city and for staffing positions.
Let's, if you could summarize.
Wrap up. Yep. I think the final slide is I'll just say overall, I won't read this to you, but there are incredibly important lessons for each of the across the framework and in each city. And I think the framework that we've put forward is really just a system of interrogation to say where are we and where are we headed realistically. It's kind of an anchoring set of questions, just to kind of ground truth ourselves along the way. One thing that I don't want to let go of is the process of formalizing services in a city and in a country is incredibly difficult. We all know that. In the process of doing that, it is extremely easy to leave out the marginalized. That was the intention. That was the kind of driving intention behind all of these investments for us. And we find ourselves on a regular basis struggling to set up any kind of formalized system with our partners and can easily lose track of how the poorest are being served, or if they're being served equitably. So if there's one message that you take away from any of this is, when you're interrogating your system, do not forget to look at how each of those functions and how your monitoring systems capture services to the poor and continually incentivize equitable coverage and pricing and financing for the poorest. Over. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. Thank you very much for not only giving the context of citywide inclusive sanitation, but also giving two examples of Zambia and Kampala of how the progress has been made. Now, there's a question from Mr. Nasir from Pakistan in the chat box. If you could kindly respond to his question, what sort of support the national governments and provincial governments are extending to institutionalize some of these efforts, as well as the budget lines made available to them. So thank you, Alice. We will take some questions at a later part of the program. If you can just take down the screen.
Yes. Okay. Oh.
So friends, if you can see my screen. Okay, so what Ms. Alice outlined for all of us, just to reinforce in 30 seconds, that if you want to have a holistic approach to sanitation, not a piecemeal, but with equity, safety, and sustainability as outcome, you need strong foundational governance systems in place. Using the case of Lusaka and Kampala, she has outlined how these cities, with the support of national governments or otherwise, are building responsible entities for driving the sanitation, whether it is centralized or decentralized. How their performance is monitored through KPIs. KPIs are key performance indicators. And then how resources are being organized to ensure that the services are delivered on a sustainable basis, both human resources and financial resources. For example, dedicated cell or a dedicated department in Zambia, FSM department, is an example of creating a very clear responsibility within the local government context or a utility context of prioritizing sanitation, and also a different agency monitoring their performance. It could be a national agency or a provincial agency. And then budgets are clearly defined and ring-fenced. So she has given two examples of how sanitation progress has been made, not just as establishing FSTP or establishing a treatment plant or making investment for a few trucks here and there, but creating what is called sanitation governance systems. It is not just about, as engineers, all of us will think, okay, FSTP is a top priority, public toilets is a top priority. But what Alice has amplified using examples is that sanitation governance is a very important element to think through for all of us to ensure that sanitation is delivered on a sustainable basis. Now, having understood this, I would like to now invite Mr. Singh from ADB to understand how some of these principles of sanitation governance and sanitation, non-sewer sanitation as such, is integrated as a part of the ADB portfolio, because ADB finances a lot of cities, but often it is assumed that they finance only sewerage systems, leaving behind a large chunk of population who are not connected with sewer systems. Now, what is the ADB's game plan with certain examples of your own investments where you are doing right now in Philippines, in India, and multiple geographies in Bangladesh? How are you looking at sanitation in totality? And are you also looking at sanitation governance or sanitation as an engineering? So I would like to have Mr. Singh to share his experiences.
Thank you, Professor Chari, and welcome all participants. We are running late, so I'll just quickly start and try to limit in time. Should I share my presentation or someone from there is already running that?
We can, Avinash, can you share the presentation? And Jitendra Saab, if you can keep it to 10 minutes, that will be wonderful. So
yeah, I'll try less than 10 minutes because I could see that from the presentation by Alice's and also your discussion, some of the points are already covered. So can we come to the first slide? Next one. So as Professor Chari was telling, Asian Development Bank, at Asian Development Bank, we are actually committed for development, which is inclusive, resilient, and climate focused. And that is for development of everybody in the Asian Pacific. We are having members, 68 countries, out of 49 countries are in the Asia and the Pacific. From this slide, I would just want to show that it is expected that by 2030, ADB has estimated that more than 55% people will be living in the urban areas. Next slide, please. And that urbanization is posing a lot of burden on the management of human waste, whether it is solid, liquid. And these pictures show that how our urbanization is sometimes uncontrolled, sometimes the socioeconomic difference is so much that we find that there is no one solution which fits all. So we'll have to take into account all kind of developments, all kind of people, so that no one is left behind. Next, please. Yeah, this is another picture showing the low-income housing, and that also varies country to country, city to city, depending on the culture, history, and income, and other important factors. Next, please. Here, I'll just quickly summarize what is the ADB portfolio in water sector. In last 12 years, the portfolio has been $28 billion. And for your information, ADB's overall portfolio of investment had been around $20 billion last year. So this is for 12 years for water sector. And of this, water supply, sanitation, and wastewater comprise more than 50%. Next slide, please. Here, I'm trying to show that out of the Asia and Pacific, if you see the 5 regions, Central and West Asia, East Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and Pacific, then the overall total sanitation portfolio is around $6 billion. And of which, around $1.66 billion are, I can say, mostly dedicated for CWIS, and that is impacting around 14 million people, directly or indirectly through the projects. And how we do that in ADB, I'll explain to that in the next slides. Next, please. So in our water sector group, where I belong to, we have Sanitation Financing Partnership Trust Fund, and this is supported by, again, Gates Foundation. Under this trust fund, we focus on these 5 areas. One is the ongoing investment programs. Second is piloting new technologies. Third is building operators' capacity. And some of you might be knowing about this operators' capacity program of ADB. And next one is developing policies and standards. And last one is improving institutional awareness. So here I have listed a few examples. And quickly, if we go through that, in investment programs, what we try to do, it is a general tendency from the governments that when they think about sanitation, they come up with a project which is mostly having, centralized towards sanitation, and then some of the pockets are left. So we support by providing technical assistance, by providing small grants to make them assess the situation and come up with a proper, idea that by investing a little more on non-sewage sanitation, how they can address more and more people in the sanitation chain. Second is piloting new technologies. Here I've given the example of Mongolia, what we are doing in rural Mongolia of improved toilets and septic tanks, and also piloting solar septic tank in Cambodia. Building operators capacity is something ADB is having water operators partnerships program. So in this program, what we normally do is that one operator, which is rather advanced in their experiences in sanitation, in water supply, they are twinned with another operator which want to learn their practices by theory, by experiment, by seeing, and then these two operators are partnered, and they go on a process of learning from each other and basically from one side to another. And this program is being run for more than 12 years now. Here are a few examples for developing policies and standards when we having continuous dialogue with the government for the importance of having policies, FSSM policy, sanitation policy, and we also assist them in preparing those policies and finalizing those policies through our technical assistance. So here are some examples from India, Nepal, and Mongolia, and also in Philippines. And improving institutional awareness, this mostly we find that institutional awareness is not only from sanitation point of view, but also from water point of view and urban point of view. We find that the developing member countries all mostly lack this, and we try to strengthen them through our loans as well as technical supports. Next, please. So earlier Alice was talking about the basic principles of equity, safety, and sustainability. If we go back to the historical challenges, what we faced in urban sanitation, it stems from that most of the investment has been for wastewater treatment and sewerage, that is traditional sewer network and large-size treatment plants. At the same time, we had less capable institutional capacity because our focus had been mostly on water, not much on sanitation. Poverty targeting is weak, and there has been limited involvement of the small-scale private sector. And this is one of the most faced challenges in developing member countries we have come across. And now what we are doing, we have shifted our focus to 4 new areas in Asian Development Bank, and private sector participation is one of these focus areas. So what we are trying to do is that we are trying to become a catalyst kind of thing so that private sector finds purpose and also some kind of security in investing and coming forward, because we understand that this urban sanitation problem can be better addressed if private sector are coming through. Next, please. So this slide we can skip because already we have discussed about equity, inclusion, and sustainability. And this is the, we call it CWIS Inclusive Sanitation House at Asian Development Bank in Water Group. And how it takes to, if you see in the third layer, we are coming with basic principles of safety and reliability, equity and inclusion, sustainability, and sustainability also has a part of capable institutions. So through different bullet points have been shown, these activities address these elements, and that's how we come to outcome level. That is the second layer, and that is citywide inclusive sanitation. And our aim is to provide safe access, safe services of sanitation to everyone, leaving behind nobody. So that's why I was telling in the starting that we have to customize the solutions. No one solution fitting for one scenario. We'll have to learn from one success and try to implicate it a similar scenario. Next, please. Here I will take you through how internally we are doing at Asian Development Bank. So in the circle center, you see that how ADB project cycle is framed. We have first thing, country partnership strategy and regional cooperation strategy, which at larger scale at national government level is set up in collaboration with Asian Development Bank. That takes 2-3 years time in preparing. Next is this come for preparation of the particular project we are talking about. Next is approval, implementation, and then completion evaluation. So what we have done in our water group, we have prepared 14 guidance notes. And these guidance notes focus on non-sewer sanitation, CWIS, and you can see here that how it has been linked that which of the guidance note is predominantly important in which stage. And these guidance notes serve as a tool to the project officers within ADB who are from different background, handling different projects. But if there is any kind of scope, any kind of possibility to include CWIS in their projects, they are helped through these design guides as well as from our group in including the CWIS components. And for your information, there are 3 design guides, guidance notes which are available in the public portal. And right now we are working to make more design guides updated and make it public. Next slide, please. So these are the 3 design guides. First is on basic, what is citywide inclusive sanitation? Second is about how to address gender equality and social inclusion in our CWIS projects. And third one is how to improve access to sanitation services for poor households. So these are available in public portal, and maybe after this presentation, I'll share the link for everyone's information. And we are hopeful that very soon we will be coming out with more and more publications for public information and use. Now, I'm quickly just taking you through a few case studies or examples how we are doing. Like I was explaining you earlier, how at ADB we are addressing the issue of CWIS. And Professor Chari was telling that ADB, it is publicly understood that, you know, we are investing more and more in centralized sewage system and treatment plants. But how we are developing more, that I'll try to just take you through. First example I have taken from Uttarakhand, and this project was for Dehradun and Nainital, where the scope was already formulated by the government for having a large network of pipeline of sewer lines and then sewage treatment plants. And then they also identified that all people cannot be connected to the STP. So they came up with this idea of having FSTP. So basically, they came up with the collection of septage and bringing it to STP, co-treatment, and that was already built in. Now, what we did in addition to that, with the help of ADB technical assistance, again here, this is supported by BMGF to some extent, we supported them the conducting of FSSM situation assessment, both in Dehradun and in Nainital, so that they are very clear about how this is, how important this is for CWIS is for the people and how easily they can be connected to the main system. So this study has been done, and now they are in a better position to take decisions. Now, for information based on this study, they are now coming up with similar study and similar scoping for Haldwani city in Uttarakhand again. So very soon, maybe you will come to know about the development of a good CWIS and sewage system in Haldwani. Next, please. This example from Khulna, which Alexis was already discussing. So I will just tell you in brief that the project was having scope, the main project was having a scope, 2 STPs, 1 FSTP, and large sewer network. Now, with the help of ADB technical assistance, means we persuaded the government to develop FSM master plan and or strategic action plan. And also we ensured that in the future projects which are coming, sewerage as well as on-site sanitation is adequately addressed in the main investment project itself. Next, please. This is another example from Philippines. Baguio city is basically called summer capital of Philippines, and this city attracts a lot of tourists. And it was anticipated that if you don't address rightly the problem of septage and liquid waste, then it will not be attractive for the tourists. So this project was taken on priority. And here also ADBTA supported the development of fecal sludge management plan and FSM management governance system, which we were discussing earlier. And also they started scheduled dislodging and tagging the vehicles which are carrying the septage and all. Next, please. This is an example how in ADB projects we try to address and basically plan how this CWIS not missed out. So here you can see that, you know, with different layers, only in one slide is difficult to explain that, but I'm trying to say that first we take the population density on the one layer, and then we see how the terrain, the levels are supporting, topographic levels are supporting, and we come to know that, okay, this can be all connected through centralized sewer because they're high dense, but some of the pockets are left out. And again, we found that there are some pockets which are highly dense, but because they're at low level, they cannot be connected to the STP. So it helps in very evidence-based planning for providing non-sewage sanitation as well as sanitation in the first go itself, and not coming across that, okay, we missed out something. Next, please. So these were the few case studies. I was just explaining that how we integrate CWIS concept in our regular projects. And moving forward, what at ADB we are looking forward is that now we are in wastewater-based epidemiology, we are conducting right now in Nepal and Philippines. And that is coming out very, very encouraging. And their government and their departments are planning to scale it up. Database sanitation planning, as I was earlier telling you. And we are at the same time focusing on capacity building and knowledge management. As we all understand, this is very, very important for the sustainability point of view. Next, please. So I'll sum up here. And I just, again, wish to reiterate that at Asian Development Bank, we are committed for city-wise inclusive sanitation. And though at different member countries, the mindset is to have a centralized sewer solution, STPs, we are trying to support them through the grants, through the technical assistance, and make them realize how important it is. And at the same time, we are showcasing them the success story from different projects, be it from BMGF supported projects or elsewhere. We try to maintain continuous dialogue and advocate the CWIS concepts. Thank you so much. And this time was very limited. If you have any further query, if you want to understand more about other examples, you may contact me later. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. I think this is a wonderful presentation. If you can share some of the tools that you have developed, some collaterals that you have developed, you may place it in the chat box for the benefit of all of our participants. So friends, from the ADB, Mr. Singh's presentation, it's very, very clearly evident that a good planning process is very important. That's number one. So they have actually invested in developing what is called Sanitation Service Delivery Improvement Plan or situation assessment. Based on that, based on the density factors, based on the topography, based on the affordability, availability of water, they have used a combination of sewer systems as well as a non-sewer system, but with a very clear overarching purpose of improving safety, public health, and environmental quality. It's not a choice of a technology which is guiding, but the outcomes of public health and sanitation actually is guiding the process of technology selection, which we discussed last time. So I think this is super important. Planning is extremely important. They have done a good situation assessment. And then based on the situation assessment for example, in Dehradun, they have used the existing STPs to function as co-treatment facilities to take the septage there and get it treated. So these sort of practical solutions have come because of a robust situation assessment. And we will discuss about the situation assessment processes in the subsequent classes. Now I invite Mr. Mueed Bhai, Dr. Mueed, who is leading as Chief Operating Officer of FSSM unit at the national level in Bangladesh, a very, very progressive entity which is taking the lessons across length and breadth of Bangladesh, all municipalities, Paurashavas. However, in this case, I would request him to focus on probably Shakipur experience of how the sanitation improvement is taken up in a small and medium town context in a very practical way, in a step-by-step way. Over to you, Mueed Bhai.
Thank you, Dr. Chari. I hope I am audible, right?
Yes, you are audible. Go ahead.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So thank you for giving me the opportunity, and thank you for the presentation of Alice and my colleague from ADB, which actually, leveraging my situation not to explain many things and no need to repeat many things. So this presentation actually very intentionally, developed for how a small and medium scale small town in Bangladesh or anywhere in the Southern Asia can start something, initiative, and how is it linked up with the citywide inclusive sanitation framework. And kicking off with something in a small and medium municipality is always a difficult task, but how we can do that. So this story is telling how it has started in a Shakipur municipality of the Tangail district in Bangladesh. So always it is important to get the political buy-in. How we can do that? Whenever we talk about the sanitation with our municipal authorities, the mayor, how will they gave their interest on that. So in Bangladesh, let me give you one example. If we go to any small, medium sort of municipalities, which we have 329, very frankly, in Bangladesh municipalities, apart from the 12 city corporations. So if you go in most of the municipalities, ask us simple questions. That which one is your biggest problem in the city? I asked the same questions to many mayors, and almost 99.9% cases, the response come from it is the solid waste management. Solid waste gets a huge problem for that. Come on. And whereas I am talking with the sanitation, which is some maybe fecal sludge management, toilets, sanitation, value chain, and everything. So the political buy-in is something like how we can integrate with our policy regimes. So we have our local government act, we have our institution regulatory framework followed by our national action plan, which always guides us and gives the responsibility to the municipal authority, both for fecal sludge management and solid waste management. So this is the integration of the policy linkage with the CWIS very key functions, core functions, responsibility, accountability, and resourcing. That means the city authority is responsible for both solid waste management and fecal sludge management. The city authority is accountable for both solid waste management and fecal sludge management. And the political buy-in in many cases in Bangladesh is the combination of both fecal sludge management and solid waste management together in a single piece of land, so that it can be interested by many of the municipal authorities to preserving the public health in the city, to make a clean city on that. And this was happened in the Shakipur. And we actually co-treat the solid waste with the fecal sludge, and the Shakipur municipality established a treatment plant, which is out of the scope here in this presentation, but this is how the political buy-in happened there in that city. The second one, the embarking steps. How can we connecting the dots? I mean, it's nothing, if we cannot connect the dots with the city authorities, with the responsibility, accountabilities, it will not be grounded in any sort of, in any reason. So the states, we need to unfold what we are bringing the value to them, and it will help us also to know what we will do and which institutions and which policies we need to connect it here. Let me go back to these Shakipur cases. So when Shakipur is a small municipality where agriculture actually governs there. So very frankly, so the product that we intended to get from these treatment facilities is the compost, which is resellable.
What is the population of Shakipur, if you could explain to our participants?
Sure. It has a population of around 40,000 population. And there is a case study I will share with you, different case study papers, and I will going to share with you later on. So this 35 to 40,000 populations covers with this Shakipur municipality, and the whole thing comes with the circular economical aspect. So the city authority from the very beginning of this endeavor, the intention was how the city authority showed their responsibility, how the city authority showed their accountability for the service delivery. So the municipal authority, throughout the discussion, having the stronger sort of discussion and having an intention to provide the service, definitely they eager to come forward in this case that they will gonna provide the service and they will start something with their own state, which is I always admire. That can be connected with the private sector, that can be connected with some NGO operation. Of course, that is also welcome in any other municipalities also. But in case of Shakipur, here, the tweaking point is the municipal authority intended to give the service by themselves. So the application process started from the, we started from the, users end, need to submit their very, small and municipal and medium sort of municipality, and they provide the service with the 1 cubic meter or 1,000 liter vacuum truck, and they collect some fee from there, the solid waste collection, and from the vacuum truck service, the users paid at the very beginning. It was some 500 Bangladeshi currency, but later on it becomes the 1,300 nowadays. So this is something that gives some indication that they get some revenues. What I am saying here, they get some revenue. Whole business opportunity or approach will be, connecting later. But this is something inspirational. They get some revenue. So again, this is one of the connecting the dots factors, embarking states, inspiration for the municipalities. At least they get some revenues for this municipality, for this service. So that it requires some good planning. So the planning state of sort of thing, the municipality, what is they are doing and what they need to provide the service to all the city dwellers. And definitely my ADB colleagues showed the GIS mapping sort of thing. And yeah, we also did that in the Shakipur municipality, and we found out that at the very beginning, we only 50% coverage of the area that can be covered immediately on the very first day if we can provide the service. The later 50%, as you know, that the other infrastructural services are connecting to there. So with other residential areas. So within the proceeding of time and development in the infrastructures, road networks and others, the others will be connected with the service as well. So there is no possibility of the CWIS connections in that municipality, let me tell you from the very beginning. So the demand and the supply end, everything connects with the decentralized way, completely decentralized way, following our institutional framework and everything. The base point that data, how we can, it was from the very first day, how they will, provide the service with some data that can stimulate for the decision making in the very future days. And that also defines the technology. Today we're not going to show that, but the market mapping, this is also a very key factor for that municipality, that where this product or how they would, provide the service soon after they get some reusable product. Yeah, there is an, interesting, fact there. And local consideration, context is very important also. In this Shakipur municipality, there is, some, fish feeders and some, the local industries which are very much prominent there. So, the market for the products from this compost or treated wastewater or biochar, biogas, the thing that we are going to produce, the Shakipur municipality will produce, need to connect with some either agriculture or aquaculture market or some renewable energy market. But finally, the municipality at the very first initiative, they went from the compost dealers and they talk with the compost dealers with even before starting any sort of operations. The financial sustainability for the business approach, I know that was also a key major initiative by the municipality. And from the very first day, actually, it was considered that how much money that can be invested here and how much revenues that we can receive there. So always there is a gap there, very frankly. And at the end of the year, I can say like that, with a good business approach, the 90%, 80 to 90% financial recovery can be done. And in the last year, in the 2021, 83% financial recovery that was made by the Shakipur municipality. And it was the rest 13%, if you consider that, it's nothing, so much, but how we can connect that? It requires some capacity building also. Why I am saying that, I can link up with the presentation with my ADB colleague. The capacity building requires, it's not the skills, it's not the technology driven sort of thing, it's not the management sort of thing. It's the thing, how we can actually connect with the proper resource, or financial institute to fund for the rest 13%. Even very frankly, the government itself, the local government division or the ministry has some allocation of fund that can be tapped also. Number 3, many of the municipalities actually have the 15% of the total allocation for the sanitation. But surprisingly, in Bangladesh, many of the municipalities don't utilize that sanitation budget, 15% of their allocation budget for this purpose also. So these are the things actually need to, know by the mayors themselves, need to, have their confidence on the financial investment on that, and to tap the rest of the funding from the external associates also. So finally, the monitoring of data, it was started from the very first day when it was started in 2015-16, the sheet flow or excavator flow diagram, you can see that it started with the 0%. Gradually, they monitored with the over the years. In 2018 or 19, just before the COVID, it was 43%, and at present it is 58%. And these all are actually published in the Suzana website. So the point is they are monitoring with this excavator flow diagram by the municipalities, and these examples actually lead us also, inspired us also to develop a sanitation national dashboard by the Department of Public Health Engineering, which actually is linked here at the bottom left side of that. Later on, you can access the sanitation dashboard, where you can get at present 64 municipalities data, including the Shakipur and other municipalities. And we have the target, the Department of Public Health Engineering, under the leadership of the institution, we will cover it to 329 municipalities very soon. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for listening to me. And finally, just to let you inform that at the beginning, I forgot to mention, the CWIS FSM support cell is supported by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Thank you, everyone. Over to you, Professor Chand.
Thank you. Can you take out the slide deck, Avinash? Yeah. So thank you very much. Mohit Bhai, I just wanted, for the benefit of everyone,
Right.
The Shakipur municipality is a very elegant case study that you have presented. Most of our participants can relate to. It's a small and medium town, so maybe 40,000 population. And you have this conservancy department which manages this service delivery, right?
Absolutely.
And the municipality, the conservancy department within the municipality manages this service delivery, and then they deliver the service. The government delivers the service, and they charge a small 1,300 taka per trip of on-site sanitation. And they're also doing a treatment plan. They have a FSTP, and then the waste coming out, treated waste, is recycled and reused for various applications. So that is a summary of Shakipur. And this can be replicated pretty easily. This model can be replicated pretty easily, right? In any municipality.
Yeah,
what is stopping us?
No, there is no stopper actually.
Yeah.
As mentioned that, if you talk with any of the mayors, particularly in the municipalities level, the political will, we need to understand their side also, not from our side.
Sure.
And you will be happy to hear that almost 150 cities will be, getting the CWIS, introduction and FSTPs and all sort of capacity developments under the, in the DPH, Department of Public Health Engineering projects within next 2 to 3 years.
Sure.
So this is a big move with the, integrated waste management, which covers both the fecal sludge and co-treatment of the solid waste as well. So I think this is what the main.
So in your case, Shakipur case, are the political leaders giving the same or equal, if not equal, but are they giving importance to the sanitation, fecal sludge management at par with municipal solid waste management as the realization has set in, or it is still a big tussle between solid waste and the fecal sludge management?
No, Professor Chari, let me, please, one part is when we talk about the sanitation and CWIS, citywide inclusive sanitation, we must listen to what the mayor's demands, number one. But yes, when we talk about only the fecal sludge, the point is from the mayor's side, no one is talking on the solid waste. There is no one apart from that. So in order to provide the service and to show their mandate, what the CWIS says, accountability, responsibility. So we need to connect those also. And for which actually it is a sustainable way to, to connect. Absolutely.
Makes so much sense.
Number two is we don't have enough land for for separate solid waste management and fecal sludge management for a municipality. So it is again a win-win situation to cover the land or to use of land efficiently in Bangladesh. Number three, while doing the operation and maintenance, it also reduces the total cost of the operation and maintenance rather than separate operation maintenance of the two plants. So these are the things actually also instigate us to take the decisions on this integrated waste management for the rest of the municipalities. Over.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mohit Bhai. So this is fascinating, looking at sanitation in totality, both from a political point of view, from city point of view, both solid and liquid, or even the fecal sludge, they have to go hand in hand and in an integrated way. That is the lessons coming from Shakipur and Bangladesh in particular. I now invite Mr. Alan, who is a manager leading the Kampala story. Actually, Alice has already presented, but Mr. Alan is going to tell us what are the ways in which they have operationalized the citywide inclusive sanitation program. What are the learnings for other cities? And if you can just explain the step-by-step process that you went through, that will be very, very useful. The only concern is the time. So kindly try to restrict to 10 minutes, Mr. Alan. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, it's afternoon here, so I'll say good day to everyone wherever you are. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about our experiences in Kampala regarding citywide inclusive sanitation. And thanks to all the previous presenters, because they have more or less laid the groundwork. Actually, Alice gave a very good situational assessment of where we are right now. And so mine is going to be telling the story as the professor has mentioned. So I just describe the journey, and also, if time allows, just talk about specific interventions that are addressing the equity side of things. So for Kampala, for those that may not know where it is, it's a small city at the shores of Lake Victoria, which is the largest freshwater lake in Africa, and I think the third largest in the world. So protecting this water resource is a key motivation for the CWIS program, as well as the public health, minimization of any risks to public health in the city. So as Alice was mentioning, we've got a policy framework at a national level that covers pretty much all the aspects of water and sanitation. But these policies assign the mandates to different institutions, something that she mentioned as well, and that at a city level, or what was done was then to put all these policies into one reference document, which was the Sewerage and FSM Ordinance. And why that was especially important was that the policies are very light on FSM. And the city had recognized that in the spirit of CWIS, you need a combination of technologies. So it introduces the FSM and a framework within which that will be delivered, which is then operationalized with the utility master plans, some standards, and a strategy on how the city can reach the SDGs 2030. So at the institutional framework, as Alice mentioned, it splits where the city is responsible for non-sewer sanitation, and the utility covers the piped services in the form of either water or sewerage services. So the key message here really is that irrespective of the institutional framework, a bit of leadership is important or necessary, and that for our case, the city has provided the leadership in terms of expanding or extending services in the city. So Alice mentioned this, showed this. I won't dwell on that. I'll just mention that 11% of the city is sewered, which is not very new or strange to many cities. And so that the bulk of the city relies on non-sewered sanitation, and that we have a very vibrant private sector that is then offering these FSM services to wastewater and fecal sludge treatment facilities that are managed by the utility. So the journey. In 2012, the city leadership had a very ambitious target of transforming a city into a vibrant modern city, and which really highlighted sanitation as one of the pillars to do that. And as the previous presenters have all mentioned, it all starts off with a city assessment in terms of what's the status of the city. And for our case, it was a citywide census, sanitation census that was conducted. But in addition to that, there were conversations held with sanitation actors to more or less get a unified position on what the status of sanitation was and what needed to be done. Once that was done, then there were, the next question was, what evidence do we have that can be used to demonstrate how sanitation could be improved? And so the starting point was an institutional sanitation improvement program to work with schools and other institutions to demonstrate, to show some live examples of how the sanitation could be improved. And a lot of this was then driven by the technical leadership, where, as I mentioned, we had a very vibrant private sector, and the idea then was, how can this be organized more to provide more efficient and more effective services? So once that market, urban market for sanitation was structured, then the conversation started on how this can be sustained in the long term. And so again, the ordinance and the standards came in, the strategies came in, and to the point right now where we're now trying to address the equitable provision of safe sanitation services in the city, especially targeting the urban poor. But the discussions, as soon as we start the discussions about the legal frameworks and all, then the political leadership kicks in, because then they are the key stakeholders when it comes to making these laws. What I'll mention is that conversation then becomes easier because you've built the case, the technical case for them, and demonstrated how that can be delivered. What I'll mention though is that this has taken about 10 years, so building some of these sanitation systems can take some time. And this is what our program looks like now. So again, the key point here is that ours is a city stroke utility stroke private sector model, because those are the key stakeholders in the provision of services in the city. The other bit I'll mention is that it's been done incrementally, as you saw on the other slide, the previous slide. And so that the message here is that whatever plans a city is making, and I think the second presenter mentioned it, it's worth considering an investment across the whole value chain, because if, for instance, you're investing in public toilets or household toilets, then you need to cater for how the sludge from those facilities will be safely emptied. So either through sewers or FSM services. You need to also think of where that sludge will be delivered. So the treatment capacities and obviously the supporting systems that we've talked about. Similar to what Dr. Hamid mentioned, the monitoring systems are in place. It's a combination of community reporting as well as the city reporting. So the community side, we've got volunteers that move around and identify the sanitation issues, and then that comes up to the city. The city level, you've got inspectors that go out and try and make sure that the premises are complying. And all this is on mobile applications that also capture the FSM side of things. So when a private MTR goes to pick up the sludge, then it is tracked all the way to delivery. And as well as a call center that helps with any grievance management or any issues, nuisance notification that may come up. So through the monitoring system,
Alan, can you take a full screen, please?
Oh, is it not? Oh, sorry. Let's see. Full screen, full screen. No, I've forgotten how to do that now. You've put me on the spot.
Okay, so
let's see, full screen. Was it a view?
Yeah, try that. No.
No.
Yeah, probably this one. Yeah. No, next, earlier one.
That one?
No, earlier.
That is zooming. Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
we can go for full screen. Yeah, that'll be better.
Is that working?
Yeah, it's better.
Okay. I was quickly going through.
Yeah.
I don't mean for that. That's not working, but let's go with this. So the monitoring shows that there's a section of the market that is not accessing these services. Some of the reasons for that are to do with affordability, others to do with availability of these services, especially timely, and also perceptions and beliefs. So a whole subsidy program has been developed that first started off with, again, another market assessment to try and understand what the market is like. So 3 market segments were identified: the high income, medium, and vulnerable. Then after that, developing some technology options that are listed out there that the households can select. This was an interesting bit about financing. And so trying to match a financing product or methodology to each of the market segments. So where it was high income, like it's a bank loan, where it's medium, that you've got subsidies, a partial subsidy, and for the really vulnerable, 100% subsidy. As to recall, one of the challenges was availability of the products and services, and the issue was that the market is very disintegrated, or there are very many players that provide the services. So really the role of the coordinator was very important, that came up about, as well as marketing, that was very important. So about 4,000 households have benefited from that in the last 2 years. Of which more than half were either women-headed households or elderly-headed households. I think the key observation here to point out is that we found out that the creditworthiness of many of the landlords was not sufficient for loan financing. And so this is something that needs to be looked into, as well as the last point, that the toilets that meet minimum standards were still expensive for these market segments that we're looking at. And so in terms of the messaging, as I'm concluding, is that there is a cost to sanitation. And so the question of how that can be done sustainably is one that we should be thinking right from the beginning of the interventions, that many of the companies and masons find the work unprofitable. And sometimes this is because of the piecemeal way that this work comes in. So aggregation of demand, becomes a way out of that. And then lastly, just to highlight that the subsidies are really one way of targeting some of these services to especially the urban poor. And then for our CWIS journey, I mentioned a bit about leadership. Obviously, the data systems to monitor, to analyze are very important. The third point is also one that we sometimes overlook, that you need some strong technical teams at the city level, at the utility level, wherever you're operating, to be able to, and they should be resourced so that they can be able to deliver this CWIS programming. And as I conclude that last point, at the end of the day, we're all aiming to deliver sanitation as a utility. And from our experience, if you look at the CWIS framework, we started off by looking at the outputs. And the moment you start thinking sustainability, the moment you start thinking functions, then you're starting to get into the utility space. So that's where we are as Kampala, that we are really looking now to sustainably provide non-sewer sanitation service, just like the way our water and storage company is delivering the piped water services. Thank you very much, Prof. Back to you.
Thank you, Alan. If you can down the, yeah. So I think again, Kampala is a very fascinating story, friends. Couple of very strong messages. The way water and sewerage is professionalized in most of our countries. There's a department or there is an entity with capacity, with clearly defined functions, clearly defined functionaries, staffing has been deployed, budgets are being made available. What Kampala is doing and what I think understood from Mr. Allen is that a similar approach is being followed for non-sewer sanitation, particularly targeting the low-income communities. This is a big step forward, taking the example of Kampala. Alan, one point, generally, if what we heard from Mr. Dr. Muhid and earlier speakers, the political will is a starting point. Generally, we start with generating political will, bring on board all the political ownership in it, then start small, get the investments going, planning going. Whereas in your presentation, you said we started with technical will and then gradually moved to political will. So was there any particular reason for this approach, that you built a lot of technical capability or technical ownership, and then I think you have sort of graduated towards creating what is called political leadership? So the technical leadership followed by political leadership is what you have sort of articulated in your presentation. But sometimes a technical leadership cannot do without political support. So how did you manage to get the political support for just addressing the concept of non-sewer sanitation? It is actually out of sight in many cases. Alan, are you there?
That's a very good question, Prof. So our circumstances were a bit unique in Kampala. That the time when we started the journey, like I mentioned, we had a very strong technical leader, and so that really came to the fore. That the technical leadership was what was now leading in terms of building the case for FSM. And then the political leadership then had very good case studies, very good data and evidence for which to then carry on the torch to where we are today. So it was a bit different, and you might find that other cities will also have different circumstances, but the key message is that leadership is very key, whether it is from the technical or the political, to get you in that direction. Back to you, Prof.
So Alan, one more question for the purpose of, keeping the conversation also addressed to some of our friends from Maldives. Kampala also has a lot of water bodies, and it's also a tourist place. It is a capital city. Was there any political mileage coming out of this sanitation improvement from local economic development point of view, or tourism point of view, or from, political, I would say, positive political capital point of view, politicians winning votes because of investing in sanitation, or local economic development has improved because of better quality of sanitation? Was there any evidence that you have captured?
Absolutely. So the city mayor just before 2012 didn't get re-elected because there was a very big cholera outbreak that actually he got tagged. So his name was Cholera Mayor. And because of that, the political message was very clear. If you want to be re-elected, then you have to address sanitation issues. And so the subsequent political leadership has been very quick and keen to really embrace sanitation as one of the pillars on which the city can be run. And that then has translated, as you said, into the other additional benefits in terms of the development of the city. In fact, right now, the messaging is that sanitation is not only a public health issue, but it's also a development issue for the city. It's also a tourism issue for the city. It's also an educational issue for the city. So we are seeing a lot more investment from the city going into schools because they're really trying to highlight that sanitation is actually very broad, but overall very key for the transformation of the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. That's great news. So good sanitation also means good politics, and good politics would result in good, better sanitation. Thank you very much. That's a very useful message you have given. Now I will move to India case study from Trichy. Is Nilachal there on the call? Great. Niladri, you're there. Yeah. Niladri, great to see you. Friends, Trichy is one of the, from an Indian standard, it may be a small city, but from globally speaking, it is a big city, actually more than a million population city. Implementing citywide inclusive sanitation requires a different approach, but the city, as well as in partnership with Indian Institute of Human Settlement, from where Mr. Niladri is coming, they have done a fabulous job in improving the sanitation outcomes in the city of Trichy. I would request Niladri to take us through the experience of Trichy, how you went about doing it, what are the steps involved, what are the challenges. Of course, the time is a big issue, but just do your best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chari sir. We'll try to keep as brief as possible. So can I get my slide, please?
Avinash, yeah, take it.
Okay. So hello all. Very quickly, I'll take you through the case studies of the Trichy, the implementation experience. And while narrating our story, I'll also try to answer some of the guiding questions, which will be useful. So first, let me introduce, to set the context about the Trichy. As Professor Cherry said, Trichy is a million-plus city located almost at the center part of the Tamil Nadu, which is one of the highest urbanized state in India. It's million-plus city, and other figures are here. I'm not going line by line, but the next slide will be more important for our today's discussion. Next slide, please. Yeah, this slide will give you an idea about the sanitation situation of the city. So you can see the household level, almost 81% household is having the toilet connection. But the interesting point here I want to highlight is that the city has both on-site sanitation as well as off-site sanitation. And 33% household you can see connected with the underground drainage also. So since on-site sanitation is also predominant, so there's a thriving market of the public MTRs, public dislodging operators. You can see the numbers. The city also having a good infrastructure for the treatment. But this city is also almost more than 2 decades practicing co-treatment. So this kind of help us to set the context, and also I'd say understanding the city, the diagnostics should be the first step when we are adopting any CWIS, because to understand what strength and weakness already there in the city. Moving to next slide. Yeah, these are the CWIS principles. Definitely, I'm not going to, but when understanding what we did in the Trichy, definitely if we have this back of the mind, definitely it will use us a lot. Basically, we all are trying to ensure that safe, sustainable, equitable sanitation for all when the mandates, etc., are very clear. Moving to the next slide. Yeah, whatever we have done, our experience in Trichy, I would love to share through this framework. This is 2x3 framework which we use. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, so I'll start with the safety work in the Trichy experience sharing. And our safety work in the Trichy was across the full value chain. So we started with access. And when we are talking about access, a large chunk of work was in the community toilet and public toilet slide. In earlier slide, I have shown that almost 400 plus actually community toilet, but actually when we started working with the city authority, we realized after doing the detailed assessment, only 264 toilets are actually existing on ground, and that is catering almost 23,000 populations, or I would put in other way around, per day. On an average, the footfall is 23,000, and you can say almost 75 to 80% of that is the urban poor population. So infrastructure was renovated, that we enabled, and actually corporation did. How they did, I'll discuss later when we talk about the different financial sources. But the management side, many of those toilets are, please don't change the slide. The management side was managed by, was strengthened. As I said, in this city, there is a underground sewerage connection also, which is supported by the ADB. So ADB, again, urban poor settlement has a lots of issue to get those connections. So a major intervention was on that, to how to sort that thing and they get the last mile connectivity of that. Containment improvement, both household level as well as community bulk generator level was done. And again, as the objective of the CWIS, it was demonstrated, and now city is across the city scale that up. Currently, the city is having 122 on-site community toilet. Of that, 32 containments are not working properly, which CWIS demonstrated technology they are adopting at the rate of 4 lakhs per containment. So you can understand how much resource they have ballpark for this containment improvement across the city. Next slide, please. Yeah, so next slide is about, as I was talking, it is across the value chain. Very quickly, the other two part, one is the collection conveyance. The city has a huge thriving market of our private sector. So 54 companies and 72 trucks. So regulation was definitely a big work. Soft touch regulation, licensing, etc. And also digitally record keeping, which truck is coming, how much load, where from they are bringing, recording. That has been done, demonstrated, and in a process of handing over to government. And similarly for the community toilet, which actually emptied by the urban local body, is scheduling, the emptying was scheduled through the scheduler app, so that during the emptying, no toilet remain closed for more than 2 hours. So that was an intervention done. Treatment side, not major thing. Already robust treatment systems are there. Our effort was to support them so that performance monitoring, etc., can be taken care of. Next slide, please. Now coming to the equity side, a major chunk of work was done for the well-being of the sanitation worker. At present in Trichy, we are working altogether 3,963 plus sanitation workers of different types. So our main objective was that they should get their entitlement of different social security scheme. And a major chunk, almost 1/3 of the sanitation worker I mentioned are in the informal settlement, that their income, etc., was also very favorable. So how they can get supplementary livelihood, or their children can upskill and get employment, for that we collaborated with NULM NSDC, etc., Enabling National Livelihood Mission, and I can proudly say currently altogether 663 informal sanitation worker is being linked with the National Livelihood Mission in this thing. And again, city collector played a tremendous role in that. Plus health-seeking behavior, etc. Here also getting buy-in of this kind of work was very easy when we reached to mayor and councillor. Looking at the problem and the scale, it was very easy for us to get them also on the board. Gender, always in CWIS, gender is a major work. Gender is a cross-cutting issue. I'm not going line by line, but one major thing we did, that is the POSH committee, that is for the prevention of sexual harassment, which was done at the ULB level, because in the sanitation worker, a major chunk, almost 65% of the women. And for their safety security, that was the one intervention done, and which was well accepted by the Tamil Nadu government. Now they are doing in other ULB as well. Next slide, please. Now this is very important part, ULB. I mean, whatever we kept on telling that authority has to be mandated, they have a political lead, etc. So from the very beginning, their onboarding is important. And here, not only the executives, the elected member as well. So in our case, we started with forming a working group committee, which earlier used to be convened by commissioner. Current ULB is urban local body. Currently, mayor is in position. He is heading this committee. So that actually decide the course of the implementation and defined under CWIS. Parallelly, we are trying to strengthen the citizen forum, because we realized during the course of implementation is on not only the supply side, demand side has to be equally important. And their city collector is taking a pivotal role to strengthen this entire citizen forum plus the grievance redressal system. Other big realization is that not just the ULP or other department, to achieve the CWIS the way that it has been envisaged, non-state actors are also very, very important. So local NGO, local media, etc., playing pivotal role, as well as the SHG, then the Federation of the DSO, all are being formalized. So this is also looking forward to sustainability. Next slide, please. Yeah, so now coming to the responsibility, etc. part, yes, when we started working with the urban local body, especially in sanitation, we deal with two vertical, health and engineering. And initially there was a problem of overlapping roles and responsibility. We had to sit with both the team, thrash out what is their roles, where is the overlapping. It has a long way to go. It has to be properly endorsed, but that exercise was very fruitful and useful for all of us at the ULB level as well as for us. But that is not enough. It has to be also backed by the policy, etc. in place. In recent time, government of Tamil Nadu, actually they have revived their guideline for the septage management and subsequent law, etc. So that benefit we also took in CWIS. Plans integrated, many times planning is down without considering much budget, etc. So that is another area we had to work together very closely. So that was some of the activities we did for the responsibility side. Next slide, please. Accountability, yes, data. Of course, when we talk about accountability, data things will come definitely. And the IT-enabled tools are definitely playing a pivotal role here. Fortunately, Trichy is also going very digital now with the leadership of the current commissioner. Everything they are digitizing. And since the record-keeping apps or scheduler, etc., or the GPS system of the trucks already we did. So in current process, we are just embedding everything to the cities, the larger mother system. But parallelly, other than that, community presence or citizen forum is also coming up in a big way. So for this accountability part, elected representatives involvement actually changed the entire game, I must say. And resource management side, Tamil Nadu already prepared the state investment plan for the treatment side. By now, we are moving to the other part of the component with that. And resource management is very, very important in case of CWIS, not only just the financial resource, but human resource and other. But for that, the learning for us is to sit with them, with the with the ULB, try to understand what are the different sources of fund they are getting from the program, from the other sources like 15.5 commission, finance commission, or apart from the ULB fund, there are the sources of fund from the councillors, as well as they are also reaching out to CSR. I mean, a big chunk of fund for the community toilet upgradation was mobilized under the leadership of Commissioner because he approached to the CSR and we just supported him. So funding is a major chunk, but it has to, it can plan properly to greater extent the problem can be solved. Next slide, please. So some key learnings in this entire course. One is, yes, again, the roles and responsibility of the different cadre is very, very important. That has to be very clearly written out. Otherwise, it unnecessarily delay the thing. It is our learning. It may be slightly controversial, but our learning from the ground is that ULB approach to sanitation is always very reactive. We initially not found too much proper planning, or say ad hoc basis they did many of the planning. So that definitely entails some challenges. Elected member, I already told how their presence, their involvement changing the things. One thing I want to highlight here, especially for the Indian context, when we approach ULB, especially at the initial time, they want demonstration. So there you have to be slightly tactical because many times the time wastes just by demonstration after demonstration. So how that can be managed, that is very, very important thing. But in CWIS actually help in many ways to us as well as the ULB. And now we are taking this to the state level because it helps us to demonstrate the entire process. That was a definitely major key takeaway from this, our 4-5 years experience. And again, which we are also underlining, that non-state actor is very, very important in CWIS. Next slide. And I think the last one. Yeah. So challenges side, especially when we are involving with the ULB, and of course ULB is not, we have to understand and acknowledge ULB is not just for the sanitation. There are a whole lot of urban services they are meant to deliver. So the time, resource capacity, technical capacity constant is always there. And good thing is that yesterday I was in Delhi in a meeting where now ministry also started acknowledging this thing. In many ULB, human resources very lean, and they are coming up with a solution for etc. So that's a good thing to, at the macro level, people are acknowledging this thing. Lack of ownership. This is one point I want to highlight because many times we consider, or we kept on telling very loosely, the lack of poor capacity but when we go deeper, we understand it is not just the poor capacity. Many times lack of ownership also translated of non-performing of something. So that's, we have to be very careful when we are approaching. Top of the overlap, I already mentioned. Inclusion, that CWIS we are talking inclusion, that the way we are envisaging inclusion is at this point not at the top of their mind. So the entire CWIS has to be aligned to, if you want to really get the buy-in, aligned with the way the city functionaries are performing. So then it becomes more easy to get the buy-in. Some structural issues are still there, irrespective of all those things, which actually delayed our activity on ground, like gender bias, caste-based discrimination, etc. And last but not least, the lengthy institutional cycle. Sometimes that again ULB takes, which also takes a whole lot of time. So these are some key challenges we learned. I think it will be useful. And yeah, I'm now happy to take any questions, any doubts anybody have. Thank you. Thank you for hearing.
Thank you. So I think you have explained systematically experience of CWIS. You have bucketed them into different building blocks of citywide inclusive sanitation. Thank you very much, Niladri. We have exceeded the time, but I would take one or two questions. So one question that one of our participants asked, though Rajmohan has responded, is what is the relationship between SHG and the urban local body? This is a self-help group in India, and it's common in the South Asian context. I'm sure it's also prevalent in Africa. Is a women collective. Now SHG is a self-help group. It's a collective of women, but this is also now collective of third gender, collective of men. These are also becoming popular.
Yeah.
However, in the context of Trichy, I think it's a women collective. What is the relationship that local government or the municipality have with the SHG groups?
Sir, I just gave you an example. I think that will give the answer. So basically, for an example, Trichy, as I said, there are a whole lot of community toilet, public toilets are there. So around 120 community toilets are managed by 120 SHG group. That is SHE team, which is called. So those SHG group member is roughly 10 to 12. Now, coming to the question of the relationship between ULB is that all these 120 SHE teams are formally as an agreement with the urban local body. They will take care of the operation and management side of this toilet. And they will make their revenue through the collection of the user fee. They will have their right to hire a janitor, procure the cleaning agent, etc., making the indent, and they will do the smaller repairment. The larger repairment will be doing. So there's a fair, clean agreement between two parties.
So you have positioned this as part of improvement of the accountability of the system.
Yes, sir.
So is it a good model from your point of view?
I think so, sir, because lots of hassle was finished after having proper agreement in place. And now if anything is happening, we need not to go. SHG member directly reaching out to ULB and sorting this out.
Yeah, thank you. Now, Samira asked a very interesting question, which you have also highlighted, that demonstration of a project or an activity is very important to get political buy-in.
Yeah.
And use the word, it will have to be tactical. Yeah. So can you give an example? What was the demonstration? This is also common in Nepal, as she says, that unless there is some physical infrastructure improvement and people should see some pilot, then there's a greater political buy-in. So what was your experience?
So I think it is same also. In Tamil Nadu case also, experience is same. Initially, when nobody want to believe that answer, since you are also in this FSM sector for long, you also know how was our situation in 2016-15. I mean, many people used to describe FSM just as a jugaad. There was a clear direction you show on ground. Let's see whether it works or not. And then, so there is no harm in demonstration. But sometimes it happens even after one or two successful demonstration, there's a push. You do it in other place. You do it in other place. Instead of authority taking the responsibility and scale up, they just try to piggy bank on the agency. You do some more too. So that's why I'm telling you, basically, tactical. Yes, definitely we'll do one demonstration, but some responsibility you also take if it successfully runs.
Yeah. So one last question. I think Mr. Sudhir is asking that SHGs also require monitoring. So who is going to monitor them? They are monitoring the performance of the local body, but somebody has to monitor the performance of SHGs.
Yes.
So what is the model that you are suggesting?
No, there is a model actually. I will not suggest, I will share. So because here SHGs are formed under different departments, right? Like in Tamil Nadu, some are under National Livelihood Mission, some are under Mahalit Thittam, etc. So under every department, or even if SHG formed by a private sector MFI institution, everybody has a set check and balance. Because if they don't qualify, they can't go to the next level of financial advantage, etc. So that is very much there.
So even SHGs have what you call performance monitoring. They have KPIs, key performance indicators. They are guided by a service agreement. Hence, there is a greater accountability.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think there are quite a few questions, but I think Alan and a couple of our colleagues, Mohit Bhai, I think they have answered. And Mr. Singh also placed a lot of questions. I think this is a very useful conversation. So friends, what we discussed today, starting with Miss Alice as well as Mr. Singh, and then we had a whole lot of questions. There's also another case study of Warangal, which we are leading, but because of paucity of time, we are not presenting it. We will take it up subsequently. So the key message from today's conversation is that, number one, FSM, citywide inclusive sanitation, is not about technology per se. Technology is a means to achieve sanitation improvement. But equally important, what Alice has highlighted, you need to have a good sanitation governance in terms of responsibility, in terms of accountability, in terms of resource planning. Otherwise, it will become a piecemeal approach, number one. Number two, as Mr. Singh said, a lot of planning and data, MIS, is very important to target our interventions. I think this is very, very important. So how do we start a CWIS planning process? We will, of course, cover in the subsequent sessions, but it's very, very important. A city may have a sewer system, but citizens may or may not be connected to the sewer system. That's a problem. So the data, the evidence, the baseline will help us to plan our investments, plan our developing the blueprint for sanitation service delivery improvement. And we had a series of case studies starting from Kampala. Then we had a case study of an integrated approach from Bangladesh. And then we have a case study from India. All these case studies have clearly demonstrated that we need to build sanitation service delivery improvement, but equally important is to build sanitation governance in terms of roles and responsibilities, in terms of making them, their key performance indicators, deployment of resources. All of these systems are equally important. And that came out very strongly from Mr. Singh's, Ms. Alice's presentation. So these are very, very enriching case studies and experiences, which is a good starting point for our next session and subsequent session on citywide inclusive sanitation planning process. We will be deploying, sharing with you a lot of tools. How do we go about planning? Step 1, step 2, step 3. All of these things will be taken forward. Today is more like a warm-up session for you, giving a flavor of case studies from different regions and how cities are making the journey towards sanitation improvement. It is not about sewer versus non-sewer, as our friend from ADB said, Mr. Singh. They had STPs. As Niladri said, they have STPs, but they have used STPs for the benefit of co-treatment, the sludge, instead of setting up a new fecal sludge treatment plant. So the idea is to plan well, and that's what we are going to do in the subsequent sessions. We have exceeded the time in a big way. Apologies for keeping you hold for beyond the scheduled time. Thank you very much. I thank all the speakers for staying back and addressing some of the questions in the chat box. And I thank you very much, all the participants, for staying back beyond the scheduled period.